Hi, in this video, we're going to talk about BPD and alexithymia. And I think talking about this is really important. A lot of folks have written me and asked me about it and stuff. And they've said, is there a connection between BPD and alexithymia? Now, many of my clients ask why emotions seem so foreign to them. They seem unknown. They're uncertain about it. They have this difficulty with emotion recognition and emotional management. And it's really hard for them to identify their own emotions, let alone control them. And it's like I say, if you don't know what it is, how can you learn from it and change it? So we're building insight. We have to build that sense of awareness. Looking at alexithymia and looking at BPD can really help build your insight into it. And I'm going to give you some tips on what you can do to build your own emotional awareness and things you can do to help yourself, as well as I'm going to give you some emotional intelligence tips that can help you build your emotional intelligence to decrease the impairment associated with alexithymic symptoms. All right. So this is a lot like what's in the box. And the what's in the box game, it's a sensory-based game in which you ask someone to stick their hand into a box to see if they can determine what they've placed inside. Now, we're going to do that here. Now, I've got a box down here. Okay. And I don't know what's in it. Someone put something in the box. All right, but I'm going to put my hand in it. All right, I'm going to feel around. I feel something soft. So it's kind of soft, right? It's squishy because I can kind of squeeze it a little bit, right? And let's see, I can kind of stretch it out a little bit. Okay, so what I know it's not a frog, right? Because frogs are usually wet or they're, it's not food, right? So I'm trying to deduce what it could be, right? Going through it. What could it be? So it's kind of squishy. I can kind of ball it up a little bit. I can roll it up. It's not a pencil. It's not a writing utensil or anything like that. Now I'm going to stretch it out in the box. I'm going to feel around, right? I feel the tip of it, also mushy and closed. And the other side is open and it's elastic. It's elastic-like, right? I think I know what it is, right? It's a sock. So I was able to identify the sock, but because I was able to deduce it, because I was able to feel around, if I'd gotten more agitated, if I'd gotten more excited, if I'd gotten frustrated, it would have been harder for me to deduce things it was from things it wasn't, right? So it's important to do that. It's important to break those things down. Now, when we talk about BPD and alexithymia, it's like your hand's in the box, right? And you're feeling around to find emotions in yourself and in others. And you got to know this, you're not alone in this struggle, and knowledge is empowerment. So let me empower you. And you know that I say that in my other videos. You know that I say that building insight is critical and knowledge is empowerment. And it's that knowledge that helps you do things differently. That's exactly what we're doing here. So we're going to do a deep dive. What I want to do first is I want to talk about the research associated with BPD and alexithymia. Now, don't skip it because I think this is really important for folks to be aware of. What does the research say? What is science saying about the intersection between BPD and alexithymia? The first study is the relationship between alexithymia and BPD suggests that the difficulty identifying, differentiating, understanding, and communicating emotions and feelings impairs the ability to manage emotions effectively. That makes total sense. If you don't know what it is, how can you manage it, control it, and change it? I don't know. I don't think you can. This may be due to an inability to discriminate emotions and bodily sensations. Now, this can help you understand those with BPD who are distressed use the maladaptive pattern of deliberate self-harm as a means of emotion regulation. And what happens is that the individual may be getting flooded with some type of emotion that they can't identify, that feels really uncertain, it feels really foreign, right? It could be like a spider or a snake, drops on you or something, you're like, oh my God, right? What happens is that self-harm, it floods the box. Here's the problem though. If it floods the box, it's a million times more difficult to identify what's in the box because it's flooded. It's hard to feel around. You don't have that sense of control over what's in the box in your hand because you have overloaded your system and you're forcing yourself to understand emotions. But what this actually does is it blinds you to the actual emotions and it perpetuates your BPD beliefs, behaviors, and patterns. And that's the opposite of what you want to do. If you're watching this video, you're not watching it to intensify your BPD. You're watching it to turn it down. Now, let's talk about the next study. There's another research study that found that individuals with BPD had more difficulty identifying their own emotions than individuals with avoidant PD, personality disorder. Individuals with BPD reported a poorer ability to take perspective of others. This is kind of alter your viewpoint to someone else's. And they had a higher level of distress. However, they showed empathic concern. Now, this is emotion that is elicited by and congruent, consistent with the perceived well-being or suffering of someone in need. So it's not an empathy impairment. It is a perspective impairment. And this tells us that individuals with BPD are highly responsive to the feelings of others, but they are impaired in identifying and describing feelings and in taking the perspectives of others. So what happens is that you can empathize with somebody, but you can't take their perspective and give you an idea of what that may fully be like. It's that sense of foggy impairment and that foggy uncertainty. And the last study I want to talk about, it was in a study of 185 individuals with BPD. And 82.7% reported a lifetime of non-suicidal self-injury. Now, non-suicidal self-injury could be cutting yourself, burning yourself, hitting yourself, whatever it may be, but it's not to end your life. It's self-harm, it's self-mutilation. Now, of those 82.7%, 52.9% were still engaging in current non-suicidal self-injury while the study was going on, and 71.3 scored in the alexithymic range. That's really high. So current non-suicidal self-injury was associated with a greater difficulty identifying feelings, just like we talked about previously. But again, I think it goes back to that sense of understanding. It goes back to that lack of understanding. It's this flood of something. It's that tarantula, that snake that's on you. Oh my God. And you engage in self-harm to flood your system. But again, what it does, it perpetuates BPD, perpetuates that lack of insight. And you become even more impaired in regulating and managing your life. And all the people that I have worked with BPD, that's what they want. Greater control over their life, greater control over themselves as well. But that non-suicidal self-injury, that self-mutilation impairs that. And if you're trying to build emotional awareness, you're further impaired in that as well by engaging in the non-suicidal self-injury. So don't do it. So what is alexithymia? Well, let's talk about the symptoms. That includes difficulties identifying feelings and emotions, problems distinguishing between emotions and bodily sensations that relate to those emotions, also limited ability to communicate feelings to others. It's difficulty recognizing and responding to emotions in others, including tone of voice and facial expressions. It's also a lack of fantasies and imagination. It's a logical and rigid thinking style that does not account for emotions. It's poor coping skills when it comes to dealing with stress. It's behaving less altruistically than others, appearing distant, rigid, and humorless, and lastly, having a poor life satisfaction. And all of these things, when you put them together and you add them to BPD, you see that it's like when you put your hand in that box, you're only really able to feel 50%, maybe 25% of the box. It's hard to identify the object. So what we got to do is we got to change that. That's why we're going to talk about what it feels like to have alexithymia and how you can change it. But recognize that these symptoms that I just mentioned are not specific to alexithymia alone, but they help you understand yourself and perhaps how you process your own feelings. Although 10% of the general population are thought to have alexithymia, the prevalence in those with autism spectrum disorder is approximately between 50 and 80%. Alexithymia is not a mental disorder or disease, and you aren't diagnosed with it, but it describes the experience of impaired or absent access to emotions. So it could be a subcomponent of a disorder. And when we think about autistic spectrum disorder, I have a video on that you may want to check out. And certainly with BPD, it could be a subcomponent of BPD, that difficulty identifying emotions, understanding it, and the difficulty relating to others, the perspective of others, things of that nature. So that's kind of that symptom. That's what it's like. Well, what does it feel like being someone who has BPD and alexithymia? Well, one of the greatest challenges is identifying emotions and connecting the dots between the physical identifiers of emotions in your body and the actual emotions. This can be that perhaps your neck turns red and it gets really hot when you're embarrassed. That would be a good indicator. Like, oh yeah, my neck gets hot and I see that it's turning red and that's telling me that I'm embarrassed. Those are the kind of sensations and emotions that maybe only come out when there's a prominent trigger. This is feelings of embarrassment, perhaps in the example, right? Where the other person isn't even immediately in front of you, right? When you drop something or you do something embarrassing, or maybe they didn't even notice, but you noticed it. So instead, you get overwhelmed in scrutinizing and rationalizing rather than feeling. That's that alexithymic component. That it's that missing emotional component. So you rationalize, you scrutinize, and you are cognitively trying to apply reasoning to the situation. So you're leaving off half of life's experience. Now let's talk about love. And love is a big one. And it's one of the most complicated emotions, as it is something that most, if not all, human beings strive for in one way or another. When you read or hear about other people's descriptions of love, it may not resonate or it may not make sense to you, such that you don't get that kind of fairy tale, butterflies in the stomach kind of feeling, which can be interpreted or misinterpreted as anxiety, lust, excitement, admiration, or so forth. So there becomes that confusion about love and emotion and in relationships, because what happens is that you expect this certain feeling, but you have an impaired ability to recognize emotion. So how do you know when love is there? You expect the butterflies in the stomach, but if you haven't had it, what do you know? Or how would you know that you experienced it? And you tend to apply a cognitive lens to it. So you miss the emotional component. So you're expecting it to be this physical sensation, and it's different in everybody. So you kind of get lost in that component of love. It gets more difficult to identify components of love and connection, which could also, when we add that BPD component to it, should also be a component of abandonment, emptiness, and rejection sensitivity. And we know that those are some central components for individuals with BPD. Now, because you rely so heavily on those physical cues to notice or identify emotions, it can seem like you experience many more negative than positive emotions because of the intensity of those negative emotions, and because positive emotions don't often feel like you're about to drown in this giant tsunami that's coming your way. So positive emotions just don't seem to cause that same degree of intensive emotion. So there becomes a greater emphasis on negative emotions. So you may have a skewed perception or skill set for negative emotions and not positive ones, which means that you have a lopsided emotional experience or understanding, and it's a greater connection or responsivity to negative emotions. Whereas we got to even you out, stretch it out, because we got to even it out so you understand the negative ones, right? You can't get rid of those, part of life, but we want to build your positive ones too, so you have a more balanced sense and component. Now, know this, that people with alexithymia alone say that it is not a major barrier to living well. It's more like a barrier to making emotional connections with people that wears you down over time and makes you feel sometimes totally misunderstood or socially awkward. But if we add in the component of BPD and the negative self-talk that goes with it, and that BPD lens distortion that also comes with it sometimes, that you have a distorted image of self and other, you have difficulty understanding emotions, taking the perceptions of others. So all of this confusion factors in, and it adds to, and it becomes even more overwhelming and more uncertain. And this is where that life-impairing dysfunction can come in. This is the distortion part of the equation. Well, knowing all this, what can you do about it? I'm going to tell you. Start identifying emotions. Now, knowing what it's like, such as in this picture, right? So you see this picture and it's a picture of emotions: happy, mad, sad, glad, shy, bored. There's a whole list of them. And what I want you to do now on my website, under the worksheets tab, is something called emotions exercise. Now, the emotions exercise is that there are two forms of this paper here. And what it shows is that one has the same faces on it. They both have the same faces, but one has lines underneath for you to fill in what emotions you think the little circles or smileys are showing. So what we want you to do is, we want you to look at the one with the lines and try to fill it in whatever you think may be the emotion that's being showed in that picture. And then look at the other and see if you're right, but also recognize emotions are culturally defined and they can be very, very subjective. So you're not right or wrong, because what we want you to do is enhance insight and awareness into those emotions. Build that skill into recognizing emotions. There is no right or wrong. There's just working to identify it. Also, I want you to make a list of your physical sensations that you feel relate to various emotions and events. I want you to become your own Indiana Jones, the archaeologist of your emotions. This is likely not going to be easy, but I'm telling you, it'll be worth it. You have to educate yourself on your body and what it's telling you and how you feel. There are sensations and signals that you need to build awareness in so that you can have a better sense of what emotions are going on inside you. Try to build emotional intelligence skills as well. You can do this by using the following skills identified by Harvard University research. I'm going to give you 3. Here we go. The first one is recognizing your emotions and naming them. Now let's try it. What emotions are you feeling right now? Can you name them? When you're in a stressful situation, what emotions typically arise? Can you think about it? Can you answer that question? What's your ideal response in these situations? And take a moment to name your feelings and dampen your reactivity, because it is an essential step to building emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is like the antithesis of BPD. If you can build emotional intelligence, it builds your awareness, it builds your sense of control over BPD, over that impulsivity, over that reactivity, because you're building emotional awareness and you're managing those emotions as well. It gives you power to control your life, to determine where your life is going to go and what you can do with it. That's what this channel is all about. But hang on, I got 2 more to go. Ask for feedback and don't take it as criticism. Now, you want to review your self-perception, for example, by asking managers, colleagues, friends, perhaps therapists, or family members. And these should be trusted people who you know aren't going to take advantage of you in this, aren't going to make you feel less than in this, okay? But how would they rate your degree of emotional intelligence? For example, ask them about how you respond to difficult situations. How adaptable or empathic are you? And how well do you handle conflict? You may think you have the answers, and even if you think you already have them, ask them anyway, because we want to build that level of self-perception and awareness. Because we know alexithymia is associated with that impairment. To overcome it, we have to build the skill and insight. I want you to beware, though, that your BPD lens, that distorting view, is going to distort any good or positive feedback that you get. So we want you to be authentic. Push yourself to be authentic. If it's something positive, don't dismiss it and only embrace the negative. Remember, we don't want you crooked. We want you straight. Okay? So be authentic. Use an authentic lens. Now, using that authentic lens, it may not always be what you want to hear, but it will often be what you need to hear. And you also have the choice to take that suggestion or insight or not. You don't have to take it if you don't want to. But if you do, then ask yourself, what can I do differently? How can I embrace this component that this person mentioned, which does some kind of resonate, right? Don't attack yourself with it, because that's you're going to waste your time. It's going to be useless. Don't do that. Instead, you want to take this information and explore it so that you can use that information to do your life differently, to make choices to do things differently. Lastly, read about emotional characters. Studies show that reading literature with complex characters can improve empathy. Reading stories from other people's perspectives help us gain insight into their thoughts, motivations, and actions, and may help us build or enhance social awareness. Now, one of my all-time favorite books is Catcher in the Rye. You may want to check that out. That is a great book. I've read it many times. It's wonderful. You may like it. Also, in the comments, leave any books that you think are really character-driven stories. They don't have to be fiction. They can be nonfiction, biographies, autobiographies, whatever you want. But the component is that we want to find characters or individuals in these books that are going through an emotional experience and they describe it really well and clearly, because that is going to build insight. We want you to build a classroom of your own that is also part of your life that's helping you build emotional insight, understanding, and control of your emotions, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and patterns. And it'll lessen alexithymia and lessen BPD, which gives you the power of choice. And that's what this channel is all about. So like, share, and subscribe, comment, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.